Good morning again, everyone. Let's get started with session 2 on day 2 of the MPP Policy Lab presentations. Let me begin by saying that I'm in my home in Gimli, Manitoba, which is situated on Treaty 1 territory, the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe. Many of you are actually closer to McGill's downtown Montreal campus, in which case you are on the traditional territory of the Kanigahaka, the Mohawk Nation. But wherever you are currently sitting, and I know that many of you are outside of Canada, I encourage you to better understand the history of your location and to recognize its Indigenous heritage. Now, and I know this is repetitive, but I'm just going to say again what the rules of the game are here. The team is going to have 30 minutes to present. My egg timer will go off at the 28-minute mark, and you will hear that if and when you get that far. Then we are going to go to the faculty for 10-minute Q&A, and that's going to be Jennifer, Natalie, and Pearl. Then we go to the sponsors from Esdc for 10 minutes, and then we open it up to the general audience. So please, again, put your questions in the chat box so that I can manage those Q&As. So without further ado, the sponsor for this policy challenge is Esdc. And the policy challenge is: what policy measures could improve participation in lifelong learning in Canada, especially amongst people from groups traditionally underrepresented in post-secondary education? All right, team Esdc, take it away.
Great, thank you very much. So hello, everyone. Thank you very much for coming to our presentation today on increasing low-skilled adults' participation in lifelong learning in Canada. To briefly introduce my team, my name is Noah, and on my team is Amar, Harris, Ines, and Udita. Our coach is Mr. Jeffrey Kelly, and our sponsor is Employment and Social Development Canada, or ESDC. As Dr. Reagan said, over the past 8 months, we have been tasked with formulating policy options for ESDC to address the following education policy question: what policy measures can ESDC implement to improve participation in lifelong learning in Canada, especially amongst people from groups traditionally underrepresented in post-secondary education? Lifelong learning is broadly defined as the ongoing pursuit of knowledge for professional or personal reasons. To narrow our scope for this project, we chose to focus on adults who are 24 years and older and who have not completed their high school education or equivalent. The literature commonly refers to our target population as low-skilled adults. However, to preface the remainder of the presentation, we recognize that low-skilled worker is an imperfect term, and our use of the term is not intended to devalue the jobs of these workers or to perpetuate any negative connotations regarding this population. The rationale for focusing on this subset of the adult population was that the higher the education level, the higher the likelihood an adult participates in adult education. In other words, low-educated adults participate in adult education the least, resulting in many low-educated individuals being left behind. This is because low-skilled adults face a plethora of barriers like low income, low savings, and low motivation to pursue education. Furthermore, many are not aware of what skills they require or how to attain them to better their lives. It is also noteworthy that the Social Research and Demonstration Corporation's report to ESDC recommended that adult education policy pay particular attention to less educated individuals. There are also a number of ongoing trends and disruptions that further justify the need for this project to focus on low-skilled adults. First, it's estimated that over the next 20 years, 42% of the Canadian labor force is at a high risk of being impacted by automation. Second, with respect to decarbonization policies, it's estimated that approximately 75% of Canadians in the oil industry could lose their job by 2050 because of aggressive carbon reduction goals. This equates to 450,000 of 600,000 people in the industry. Notably, low-skilled workers are the most vulnerable to both the automation and decarbonization trends. Finally, it's also important to briefly mention COVID-19 detrimental impact on low-skilled workers. The pandemic has caused record unemployment rates and accelerated automation, which has made low-skilled workers even more vulnerable. In comparison to wealthy Canadians, low-wage workers were as much as 6 times more likely to suffer from layoffs during the pandemic. Forming a significant proportion of the Canadian population, there are currently 2.2 million low-skilled workers across the country. It's clear that sufficient public policies must be implemented to help these individuals advance their education and improve their well-being. By focusing on low-skilled adults, this will direct government support towards addressing the barriers that hinder one of the most vulnerable groups in Canada from participating in learning activities. This will promote upward social and economic mobility, help close the education gap between low and high-skilled adults, as well as ensure that low-skilled adults have more stable and higher earnings and can better adapt to the rapidly changing labor market. I will now pass it on to my colleague Adita to discuss the current programs supporting adult learners in Canada.
The Employment and Social Development Canada is the fourth largest department within the Government of Canada. As a federal body responsible for helping Canadians improve their quality of life, ESDC is engaged in developing, managing, and delivering social programs and services in the country. Overall, there are 23 umbrella programs and over 100 sub-programs under the learning function and the skills development and employment function of ESDC, which costed at $5.8 billion, according to the data from 2019-20. Around 80% of the funding from ESDC goes towards organizations and beneficiaries as transfer payments for implementing these programs. This is a glance into the budget allocation in Canada for different category of learners. While a major part of the budget allocation of the skills development program of ESDC is focused on young learners, a significant portion of it is also dedicated towards helping the adult learners in Canada. We will now walk you through some important ESDC programs for adult learners and that we have considered while building our recommendations. In this slide, the programs on the left are primarily designed to cater to the needs of adult learners in Canada, while the ones on the right complement the needs of adult learners while catering for specific groups. Starting with the Skills for Success. Under this program, the government provides online tools to adult learners to assess their skills needs and that are foundational for building other skills and knowledge. These skills range from reading, writing, communication, problem solving, and many others. The Skills Boost Top-Up Grant, on a similar intention, is a program that supports adult learners who are seeking to retrain themselves or enhance their existing skills to attend full-time studies after spending some time in the workforce. The Canada Training and Benefit Program is designed for working adults who wish to upgrade their skills. It gives workers money to help pay for training, provide income support during training, and offer job protection for workers to be able to take time to upgrade their skills and keep them relevant. The beneficiaries receive up to $5,000 in tuition credit, are entitled to a pay study leave, and also job assurance after training. Talking about the programs with employment benefits, the workforce development agreements and labor market development agreements are crucial. Under both these programs, the federal government supports adult learners through the financial transfers to provinces and territories, which allows them to design and implement skills development programs according to their labor market needs. While the workforce development agreements facilitate skills development provision of employment benefits among Canadians who do not have a recent or sustained employment, the labor market development agreements, on the other hand, has sub-programs under two main categories. One is the employment benefits, comprising of active recipients of employment insurance benefits, and the second is employment assistance, which is available to all Canadian citizens and residents. The Lifelong Learning Plan is another important program. It allows adults to temporarily withdraw up to $10,000 in a calendar year from their registered retirement savings plan to finance full-time training or education for them or for their spouse. There are several other programs that complementarily focus on adult learners. For example, the Future Skills Program, which is new ESDC initiative for coordinating and implementing research and pilot projects that help to predict future skills and training needs, which will in turn prepare Canadians for future jobs. Among these are other programs that are dedicated towards upliftment of certain groups like Indigenous people, minority communities, and persons with disabilities to build a better future for themselves. As education in Canada is a provincial responsibility, it is important to note that there are different programs and policies that are formed at the provincial level. These programs differ across provinces as they are specifically designed to cater to the needs of the local population and labor markets. We have discussed few provincial programs in our report. However, our focus is specifically on the federal programs. My colleague Ines will now discuss the barriers to adult learners and gaps in skills development programs.
So there are two types of barriers to adult learning. The first kind has to do with mindset and inadequate resources. To explain this category, I distinguish adults willing to learn from those unwilling to learn. Among adults not willing to learn, for which low-skilled adults make the highest proportion, key barriers are dispositional and informational. Dispositional barriers refer to the negative self-perceptions and attitudes about learning, and they commonly manifest as fear, low self-esteem, and shame. With informational barriers, potential learners reject or dismiss learning opportunities as they lack accurate information. Among adults willing to learn, the top barriers are time and financial constraints. As an example, some low-skilled adults cannot get employers' permission to attend training. Others have time but lack enough funds to pay for tuition, fees, and learning tools. We also found that time and financial barriers are closely interconnected. For instance, one's inability to afford a reliable car could mean spending more time in commutes. Also, since many low-skilled adults earn low wages, they cannot afford to outsource childcare or household chores. So the description of barriers I've just provided is rather an external perspective, where an observer sees well-defined barriers and can easily map causes, effects, and solutions. The lived experience is more complicated because barriers do not occur in isolation. And so low-skilled adults experience multiple barriers as shown in this diagram. We already know that low-skilled adults are least likely to have savings. But suppose they overcome financial barriers. It's not always clear which courses to pursue and at what learning institutions, or whether the investment will even pay off. In short, low-skilled adults perceive the opportunity cost of leaving their jobs as very high, no matter how unfulfilling or precarious the jobs may be. Many low-skilled adults also lack literacy and essential skills, and so they may feel ashamed to reach out. Further, it's common that low-skilled adults had negative past experiences with school, which makes the idea of returning terrifying. To them, the memory that lingers is that school is where they fail. And of course, some low-skilled adults come from communities where formal education is simply not valued or trusted. So I will now talk about the second type of barriers. These barriers occur partly because of the inherent design of the existing programs and partly because of the administrative procedures. I draw attention to 6 programs to highlight why, even with the best intentions, these programs are falling short. Generally, any program with the following characteristics is likely to hinder adult learning. Number 1, programs that mandate full-time enrollment or a minimum time commitment. For example, Skills Boost and Lifelong Learning Plan. This is because adult learners need flexibility as they juggle work and familiar responsibilities. Number 2, programs that reimburse the cost after the fact. For example, the Canada Training Benefit. As aforementioned, low-skilled adults often earn less and therefore they struggle to save for upfront payments. Number 3, programs that do not provide timely or adequate employment income support. The Labor Market Development Agreement is a case in point, where delays in making insurance payments means potential beneficiaries do not receive timely career development support. Similarly, for the Canada Training Benefit, there are concerns that the actual insurance payment, set as 55% of the average wage, is not sufficient, considering low-skilled adults already earn low incomes. Number 4, programs that do not support employment insurance flexibility. Once again, the Labor Market Development Agreement is a good example, as there's pressure for beneficiaries to actively search and take jobs that come along. This means there's always a risk that getting Canadians back to work is a priority and not the actual learning outcomes. Number 5, programs that do not support micro-learning. This is because adult learners prefer manageable course load and intensity. An example here would be the Skills Boost grant. So other program characteristics affect learning indirectly. For example, the main concern with the Future Skills program is that misalignment between research and persisting gaps in the current programs means shortcomings are not addressed fast enough. Adding to the challenge is a lack of an open data source. To restrict access to data is to limit diverse analysis and solutions. Another example is the wage subsidy subprogram under the LMDA, where employers show less interest in supporting low-skilled adults due to tedious paperwork. So with that, I wrap up the discussion on barriers and we'll transition to the recommendations. At this juncture, we hope to have inspired the need to rethink, refine, and recreate learning and skills development programs. Our team recommends a 4-pillar approach where ESDC starts by anchoring its support on few, large, and durable programs. This measure helps with consistency and it eases administrative burden. Then, as much as possible, ESDC should consolidate programs and sub-programs that address similar gaps, especially if beneficiaries are the same. It is also critical to have predefined impact parameters and, where possible, experiment with impact bonuses. Impact bonuses simply mean that partner organizations receive funding based on the impact they create. Finally, ESDC should allow flexibility to improve scope of services and eligible beneficiaries as needed. Where gaps persist, new programs or sub-programs should be created. So to keep things in perspective, here are some practical considerations for ESDC based on the 4-pillar approach. ESDC can already leverage the Labor Market Development Agreement and the Workforce Development Agreement, as well as the Canada Student Financial Assistance as anchor programs. Whereas opportunities for bundling include 1, merging the Skills and Partnership Fund with the Indigenous Skills and Employment Training Program, since both programs target Indigenous people with similar support. Another consideration is to adapt the lifelong learning plan and repurpose it into a virtual account. This virtual account would accrue current and future funding support for adult learners. The account can also systematically track course credits. Under Refine and Evolve, ESDC should improve strategic alignment of the research conducted under the Future Skills program with persisting gaps. Topics to explore could include reducing higher attrition rates among apprentices, improving communication and outreach strategy, and incorporating soft entrance techniques. My colleague Alma will expand on the soft entrance techniques a little later. So now that we have looked at high-level areas of improvement, it's time I introduce our flagship solution. It's a composite program. For the purpose of this presentation, we'll call this program Learning for Adults Facing Multiple Barriers, or LAMP for short. Ideally, LAMP will pay upfront for core and auxiliary support, from subsidizing tuition and childcare to providing tailored navigational support. Before I turn the presentation over to my colleague Alma, I wish to emphasize that LAMP program does not disregard the usefulness of existing programs. It is rather an opportunity for ESDC to assemble all the positive aspects from existing programs, along with the global best practices, into one package of support. LAMP not only draws attention to the learning needs of over 2.2 million Canadians, it also makes learning among low-skilled adults attractive and convenient. Now, Alma will explain the details of how LAMP works.
Thanks, Ines. So now I will explain how these policies would work in real life. For this, we need to imagine the journey of a low-skilled adult from the stage where he or she is not willing to learn, or willing to learn but thinks it's impossible due to barriers. So this is the journey they will have until they successfully participate in a learning activity. In this journey, we believe that ESDC can intervene at 4 stages: reach out, guide, soft entrance, and remove barriers while learning. And now I'll explain in more details each step. The first step here is reach out. According to ESDC evaluation reports, the take-up rate for some programs is low, partially due to the public's lack of awareness of these programs. Another problem is motivation. If an adult is interested in learning, he or she can search or ask for information. But if an individual is not even interested, which is the case for a significant portion of the targeted group, then he or she will remain uninformed even if the best support program is available. This said, we are proposing a change in the communication strategy where you change from the current system where information is available upon request, for instance, through ESDC website, to actively trying to reach out to low-skilled adults to create awareness. We recognize that ESDC cannot micro-target individuals by advertisement campaigns, and even if it did so, it does not really work. So we believe that the best way to reach out is through partnerships with NGOs. As you may know, low-skilled individuals are multi-barriered, and they sometimes depend on local community-based organizations or NGOs to help them with their life difficulties. NGOs work closely with them. They enjoy their trust, and they know them pretty well at the personal level. So we recommend that ESDC delegates to these organizations the task of creating awareness. The learning branch at ESDC already uses this approach of collaboration with NGOs to support young students. So we encourage ESDC to use the same approach with adults as well. We envision that ESDC would select NGOs based on a competitive bidding process by supporting these organizations with funds and needed information. NGOs will provide personalized support and act as a communication channel between ESDC and the targeted group by organizing, for instance, awareness campaigns, hosting information sessions, and this will spread awareness about the importance of learning and the available support programs that ESDC as well as provincial government offer to support learners. Oh, I didn't notice that my video is off. Sorry for that. I'm not sure how can I. Sorry for that. Okay. Hope you can see my screen now. Okay. Sorry for that. The learning branch. Sorry, okay, sorry for that. The learning branch at ESDC already, as I said, like uses this approach of collaboration with NGOs to support young students. And also we believe that the partnerships with NGOs should be long-term ones, at least like for 3 years, as it takes time to build expertise and relationships on the ground. We also recommend that ESDC starts with NGOs in regions hardest hit by major trends such as automation, decarbonization, and the pandemic, where people are in urgent need for reskilling and upskilling. So after creating awareness, we move to the second stage, which is guiding or counseling. At this point, we are still dealing with individuals who are hesitant about learning. We know that their low participation in learning can be attributed to barriers such as lack of motivation or wrong perceptions about learning, or can even be due to underestimation of its value, or even their inability to clearly define their educational goals or suitable learning pathways. So as you saw earlier, there are several support programs. It actually took us months to understand all the support programs for adults, and also imagine there are like tens or maybe hundreds of learning pathways that an adult can pursue these days. So imagine how our targeted individuals can be lost while doing their search. And here comes the role of education-focused counseling, where a professional counselor helps individuals to find the best learning pathway and suitable support program. The concept of education-based counseling was recently piloted in 6 European countries to test whether it's effective in increasing low-skilled adults' participation in learning. And the results were impressive. In Belgium, for instance, 3 out of 4 individuals receiving guidance successfully joined a learning activity, which is a remarkable success. So how should ESDC implement the guidance stage? From the reach out stage, NGOs will be asked to advise or refer clients to the nearest place offering the counseling service. And through our proposed LAMP program, we recommend that ESDC recruits education counselors to provide free education counseling sessions to low-skilled adults. We can also draw on lessons from the pilot project conducted in the EU on how to make counseling more effective. For instance, like counseling sessions should be personalized and allow multi-sessions. It should also be conducted by experienced professionals who are able to define skills, diagnose the barriers, and provide psychological support to ultimately help the client develop like a tailored education plan. Lastly, to increase the effectiveness of counseling service, we recommend that the behavioral research team at ESDC cooperate with educational counselors to develop and test and adopt nudging techniques specific for low-skilled adults. After mitigating some psychological barriers through counseling, or our clients might still be hesitant about enrolling in a learning activity. And this can be due to having a bad experience with education when they were young, or they might also be away from school for a long time, making them unready for a learning experience. And this takes us to the third step in our framework, which is soft entrance. And it basically means that we want to ease the entrance of adults to formal learning. We can learn from best practices in this field from Switzerland. They already have a program called Migrant School Club, offering like soft entrance courses in language, culture, IT, and other fields. And some courses are offered without exams and set very low expectations to ensure that learners or adult learners do not become discouraged. Another approach used in Sweden is the study circles. And the idea is that participants or adults, who have a common interest, they come together to learn. And in summary, this concept is based on the idea that they are circle members, not students, and they are participating in a circle, not a class, which breaks some of the bad perceptions about a classroom environment. So what's the role of ESDC in soft entrance? So as you may know, that education and curriculums are not under like ESDC or the federal government jurisdiction. But ESDC has a state-of-the-art center called Future Skills Center, which is responsible for piloting and researching futuristic ideas that help prepare Canadians for future jobs. And we think that under the Future Skills Center, they can pilot these kind of soft entrance techniques to test their viability in the Canadian context. After testing and approving one or few soft entrance techniques, soft entrance can be integrated under LAMP, where it provides funding for adults who wish to start their learning pathway with soft entrance. Also linking it to the guidance step before, we recommend that soft entrance should remain an option that counselors can recommend to clients based on their contextual judgment, as some people might perceive it as an unnecessary additional time loss, or they might prefer immediately beginning the learning process. So by this point, we hope that counseling and soft entrance remove psychological barriers and get them ready and encouraged to enroll in education. But we think that there are two major barriers here: lack of financial resources and time shortage. As for finances, some support programs require upfront tuition payment or a form of upfront saving, which is not suitable for the targeted group, who often live like paycheck by paycheck, as you may know. Also, programs that do not provide adequate income support will prove less attractive to low-skilled adults. This is why we envision LAMP program to be an amalgamation of core and ancillary support paid upfront to cover tuition, as well as indirect costs such as transportation, childcare, and internet if needed. It's also envisioned to cover the opportunity cost from the foregone income, where LAMP will provide a decent living allowance. As for the time shortage, we recognize that they might not have the option of leaving work for a long time, or they might be incapable of leaving their job to enroll in a learning activity. But some support programs actually require students to be full-time students, which might detract those who do not want to leave their jobs. So we need to tackle time shortage issue by allowing flexibility. We recommend that LAMP program allows funding flexibility by not obligating full-time attendance, giving them the option to not leave their work. LAMP scope can also be expanded to allow funding for boot camps, which offer intensified learning experience in a short time. It can also fund micro credentials, where a learning program is divided into small modules, and individuals can complete modules at their own pace, and accordingly will receive funding per module. This way, learners decide the right amount of course load they feel comfortable managing. So by supporting them financially and dealing with the time shortage issue, we reach the end of our recommended framework, which we trust will improve the participation of low-skilled adults in lifelong learning. And now I'll pass it to Edita to conclude our presentation.
There are 2.2 million adults in Canada who did not finish high school. Due to lack of education, these people are often placed in low-skilled jobs for years with no real possibility to get out of it. They have the highest risk of experiencing a decline in the labor market prospects, which is even worsened by the major trends like decarbonization, automation, and recent COVID pandemic. Yes, these changes would affect everyone, but again, the ones most at risk are the low-skilled adults. They not only have the limited opportunities to get education and training, but when they do, they face a barrage of multiple barriers that often leave them behind. They are stuck in what can be called a low-skilled trap, where they work in low-skilled jobs with limited opportunities of development or on-the-job learning, and experience frequent and sometimes prolonged spells of unemployment. Therefore, it is crucial for the government to intervene with a holistic approach. As the barriers are not limited to lack of financial resources, the solutions need to go beyond providing just financial help. We acknowledge that ESDC has been doing an excellent work through several programs. However, we urge them to consider taking a step further and approach this problem through a wraparound holistic support. A support which starts from actively reaching out to these groups to create awareness of the importance of learning, then easing their entrance into learning through guidance, support, required counseling, and some soft entrance techniques. And finally, addressing the barriers of time shortage and lack of financial resources. We believe that our recommendations will help increase participation of low-skilled adults in learning, which is one of the most effective avenues to promote upward social mobility and close the social gap for low-skilled adults while helping them to adjust to rapidly changing labor markets. All they need is an opportunity, and we, as a society, should make it possible to help them succeed. With this, we end our presentation and are open to questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, team. Great presentation, great issue, and very nice timing. So let's turn it over to faculty questions. We're going to start with Pearl, and then Natalie, and then Jennifer.
And if you could just stop sharing your screen for the moment. Thank you.
Okay, Pearl Eliadis, you are. Pearl, are you with us?
Chris, maybe I can go first while we wait for Pearl to connect.
Natalie, take it over.
Great. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, team. Really curious about your LAM proposal. Would love to hear more about the financial and resource requirements to implement this solution. You spoke briefly about some of the costs of, so I see that we just need to adjust. Sorry, Chris, we have some security things where we need to.
This has been done. Everyone is able to unmute themselves.
Sorry. So my question is about the LAM. What are the funding or resource requirements for ESDC to implement this recommendation?
It's always about money with you, isn't it, Natalie? Always about money. Okay, team, good question. Who wants to take that on? And then Pearl's next.
So I can attempt that question. So we didn't come up with a specific figure in terms of how much it would cost, but I can give you a rough idea based on the existing programs, right? So for example, the Workforce Development Program, which so far is the most flexible program there is, the budget is about 900, so 700 to 900 million per year. So, you know, that gives you an idea. And also maybe if I can also refer to another program, the labor market agreement, development agreement. So that one is usually costed over, it goes to close to 2 billion a year, but that one includes like income as well, income support. But then also in our research, we found that the province of Ontario actually is already implementing a program called the second career program. And for that, what they do is they provide an income support of about $450 per week, including tuition, of course, tuition subsidy as well. So if we think about 2.2 million people, of course, there's no way you can start with all of them. You always have to start small with a small pilot. So assuming you're starting with about 300 to 500,000 people, even that I think is a lot. So maybe say you're starting with about 300,000 people per year. Those figures can roughly lead you to how much ESDC would have to budget should they choose to proceed with LAM. So maybe Amma, if you want to talk a little bit more on the second career program to complement anything that I could be missing.
No, actually, I was just gonna say the same thing around the weekly living allowance and the support they are providing, including the transportation and childcare and tuition, of course.
And also maybe another small point that I can add there is that we recognize that some provinces are actually already providing support in terms of childcare. So these are areas of synergies. The SDC does not have to put more money where the provincial government is already putting money. And we already know that the government of Canada is actually thinking to roll out subsidized childcare across the entire country. So we're actually thinking of this as something that ESDC can actually leverage on. It's like this is the direction that the government is already looking. And so it doesn't have to bear the entire burden. So although we don't have the actual ballpark figure, but those should help to see how much this program can cost.
Okay, thank you. Can I turn to Pearl Eliadis now?
Hi, everybody, and thanks to the team for a great presentation. I'm amazed at how you've been able to go in and integrate your thinking around a myriad of very complex programs. So well done. So a couple of questions from me. Well, one central question, which has to do with people with disabilities. They were mentioned in passing in your presentation. You do mention learning disabilities, I think once or twice in your presentation. And as you know, the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities has been ratified by Canada. We have created a national monitoring mechanism. Given the size of ESDC, I'm guessing it's probably going to be early on the list of departments to be reviewed by the monitoring mechanism. And so given that 15% of Canadians, give or take, have disabilities, according to StatsCan, given that they have significantly higher rates of unemployment as adults and lower education rates, my question is, where do you see barrier removal for this population happening in your presentation? So you talked a lot about barriers, but they really were based on what I understood to be mainly able-bodied and ableist sort of principles. So how would you change or amend or mold your recommendation so that you could deal with this significant population? Thank you very much.
Okay, removing barriers. Who's
I can take this question. So thank you, Pearl, for this question. Esdc already has a program called Opportunities Fund for Persons with Disability, which is like one of the complementary programs focusing on adult learning. But I think where our recommendations, like the strength points of our recommendation is two things. One, the personalization in it. So as you saw from our recommendation, we okay, let me take you a step before it. So when we started working on this project, we were thinking about, okay, how we will segmentize our population. So this is 2.2 million people, right? You can see that like these 2.2 million people, they are different individuals. They have different stories, different skill sets, different ambitions. So we want to empower each and every individual to take the learning pathway. And we know at the same time that there is no one like solution fits all, right? So the strength point in our recommendation is the personalization, as we mentioned in, like, for example, the counseling stage. So the educational counseling stage is where the professional counselor can deal with all the barriers and, you know, listen to the client and see how he can work and provide a tailored solution for the individual. So that's how we plan our recommendations. The second point that I was also like a strength point in our recommendation is the flexibility. So LAM program, we stressed a lot about the flexibility in LAM program, that it should provide funding for not only full-time students or part-time students, no, but you can also provide for boot camps, you can provide for online courses. So, you know, this kind of things that, this kind of flexibility opens the gate for, or remove the hurdles for the targeted group that you're talking about here, like people with disability.
And if I can
also come, oh,
sorry. I just wanted to add in saying that we did look into the multiple barriers that single person can have, like not just with disabilities. If you talk about women being low skilled and being a woman, they have like layers of barriers. Different people have different layers, and that's probably where, like Emmer said, we have the flexibility criteria and the way we have formed our final recommendation that we have. Ines, you had something to say.
Yes, I was going to say that ESDC actually implements what they call the gender-based analysis plus for every program they do these days. And so we really believe that if they choose to adopt the LAM proposition, they will definitely have to put it through the lens of the gender-based analysis as well. So what the gender-based analysis plus does is it looks how different like how different people in the community really experiences different barriers. And so obviously the people with disabilities are not going to be left out of this. But then also just to give you a couple of examples, some initiative that ESDC is already doing to make sure that they are catering for disabled people. If you look at the Canada Student Financial Assistance Program, for example, some of the most recent initiatives is they have allowed for more financial resources for people with disabilities so that they can be able to purchase, the tools that they need to make their lives easier. But then also in the wake of the COVID pandemic, actually, there have been forgiveness in the repayment as well. They get more consideration. So I just want to assure you that ESDC actually is very at the forefront of these groups of people.
Okay, thank you. Can I turn now to Jennifer Welsh for a question?
Good morning, team. Thanks very much. I really appreciated you hitting us at the beginning with both the scale and the stakes with respect to this issue. I had two quick questions. I'll list them both and then you can decide how you want to address them. The first is in relation to your reliance on NGOs as a way of gaining access to populations. And I just wondered if you were confident that those NGOs existed across the board with respect to the populations you wanted to reach with these particular programs, and whether you see them already existing or whether actually the provision of these programs would incentivize in a way the creation of some particular NGOs to play this role. And the second question was around, in your brief and also in the presentation, you talked about ESDC promoting collaboration between jurisdictions, which is, generally a big public policy challenge in Canada, collaboration between jurisdictions. And I just wondered if you had a specific idea of how it could better promote collaboration. Does it need to do something specifically different? Does it need to create some incentives? I'd just like a little bit more detail on how you're thinking about that role in particular. Thanks very much.
Okay, I can take the first question about the NGOs. So as I mentioned in the presentation, actually the ESDC, the learning branch in ESDC, they already use this approach for people who for post-secondary education. So for people coming from poor families or people or poor neighborhoods, they depend on NGOs to support students and help them like provide hand holding and give them and create awareness about the learning options and pathways available for these students. So we just think that as it's done for students coming from low income families, it's the same thing for low skilled adults who are probably also coming from low or like a poor, or coming from like poor families as well. For sure, we think that NGOs, and we already interviewed some of the in our stakeholder interviews, we interviewed some NGOs managers, and we saw them that they are very keen to participate in something like that. And they said that of course, if ESDC can provide fundings, they can actually expand their network and go to, for instance, rural areas or indigenous people's communities and stuff like that. So I think I have all the points for this. I covered all the points for this question. Maybe if someone else wants to add up.
I can take the second question. So considering the increasing the collaboration among different provinces, I completely agree to the fact that because it's a provincial responsibility and among different jurisdictions, it is extremely difficult. And ESDC has been trying to do that. And what I can say is that we have mentioned it in a report as well. There was this one a bilingual database that used to be there in Canada, an adult literacy database called Copium, which was later defunded by the conservative government. So it provided the data on adult learning for over 25 years. And a lot of jurisdictions, the provinces, they basically came and included what they were doing and the data they have according to the adult learning and what the programs they are giving in this one database, which actually helped all the different provinces to understand what's happening around the country in different provinces and basically learn from them. So in a way, that is one area where we think that ESDC can play a role and maybe get that database working again.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, team. I'm going to turn now to the good people from ESDC. So I'm going to start with Barbara and then Petronilla. Barbara?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, team, for a wonderful presentation. I work in the learning branch. I should first mention ESDC is absolutely massive, as you indicated in the first part of your presentation. And there's so many pieces to it, and many pieces do help adult learners in different ways. And certainly the learning branch, we take care of Canada Student Loans, Canada Education Savings Programs, supports for youth. So I can speak to that. And the support that we provide is regardless of age. So adult learners have been a policy interest of ours for quite a while. And it's interesting that you spoke about wraparound supports, because that's exactly some of the policy focus that we've had for quite a while in the past and moving forward. So I'm really heartened to hear that. And we'll be reading the paper very, very carefully. It's true that we do work increasingly with NGOs. You hit it right on the head, and more so. The most recent budget gave us almost $12 million to do just that, to work with NGOs to provide supports, wraparound supports that you spoke about, to youth in high school who have the barriers that you spoke of, low-income families, Indigenous students, students in remote areas, maybe students whose no member of their family has ever gone to post-secondary education. So we are doing outreach in those areas and looking more and more at our student loan programs and our Canada Education Savings Program. As you rightfully indicated, there's been a lot of support over the last little while with COVID. And I think that's really caused us to take a look at the programs and rethink some of the strategies that we've had. So in a way that's really kind of shaken us up and caused us to modernize and look. So really appreciate those remarks. So I'm just very heartened, very grateful for this presentation. Extraordinarily good work. I can see that it was a ton of work for these students, and I congratulate them and I applaud them. And I'll pass it over now to my colleague, Katerina. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Katerina.
Hi, so I just wanted to echo Barb's congratulations to the students and congratulate them on a job very, very well done. Throughout your presentation, it was quite clear to me that you had thought about the multiple barriers that adult learners may face, and particularly that it's not just financial. So I really applaud you on taking a very complex issue and looking at it from multiple angles. One question that I had, and like Barb said, we look forward to reading your report more in depth. So perhaps it's in the report, but I just wondered if you could touch a little bit on the role of employers in the LAM proposal. So I think you touched a little bit on if an employee can't take time off from their full-time job, there'd be maybe support for micro-credentials or shorter duration programs in the evenings. But I'm wondering about the role of employers in maybe providing some funding for training, or would you see employers as providing permission to maybe take an hour or two off per week? Was just curious about that angle there. Once again, thank you so much, students, and congratulations on a job very well done.
Okay, role of employers. Who wants to take that on?
Okay, I can attempt this question. So when we were thinking of the reach out strategy, we thought about like 2 points. The first point is the community-based, which is through NGOs, and the second point is the work-based or workplace. So it includes like employer and unions. And we saw that ESDC is already doing a great job in this area through the LMDA program and the WDA program. So that's why we did not expand more on this point. And we believe that the missing part is just the community-based area. That's why we expanded more on this idea.
Okay.
Yeah, I can also add to that. Indeed, there's a role to be played by the employers, and some of them are already actually doing just that. And you know, as Amma said, there are programs that are already subsidizing employers. But also something maybe to highlight there is how do we make the process a little bit easier so that they don't find it maybe too tedious, especially the paperwork, right? Because we know, for example, the wage subsidy program is really giving some money so that employers can hire some of the low-skilled workers who wouldn't otherwise be able to work and earn and gain some of these skills. But then again, many of them, according to the evaluation report, were not too keen about the whole administrative procedure. So for us, something that we think could be a very quick win there is, how do we make that easier for them so that they can do that? And then again, I talked briefly about the, having the account, the virtual account, and that's something that it can actually do, right? We're not saying that the government should be bearing all of this burden, and we know some of the employers want to chip in because they benefit from the skills as well. And we see this a lot in other countries. There was this very beautiful case study from the US, I believe, somewhere in Texas, maybe I can't remember exactly the province. And one of these big companies, that's what they did. They created their own night school for their own workers, and productivity increase, profitability increase. So this is something that employers can actually take on if they see that value, as long as we don't make it too tedious. So definitely, we see their contribution there.
Okay, folks, we've got Pearl and then Jennifer, and if there's still time and nobody else speaks up, I've got a question. So Pearl, please take it away.
Thanks very much, Chris. Thanks very much, team. I had a question that followed on from my earlier question around disability. So when we're talking about barriers, the assumption that seems to be being made is that folks will be able to navigate an internet interface, that they will be sort of functional adults, or that they may be functional adults who are able to do this on their own or potentially with an assistant. Being in Quebec, I'm particularly sensitive to the real lack of any programs for autistic people, particularly above the age of 21, when they get phased out of school facilities like Giant Steps and others, and are no longer able to access supports. So I'm thinking about your Barbara's earlier question or point around wraparound supports, which I think is hugely important. And I'd be interested in your thoughts around students who really are neurodiverse, students with autism, students who need, I think, more than simply individual flexibility can give you. I think you may need a programmatic approach or a more systemic approach to students who have particular types of disabilities, as opposed to saying we're going to tailor make every program. I think that would bury ESDC in about 3 minutes if they had to do that kind of work. So really interested to know what your thoughts are around a systemic approach to barrier removal for particular kinds of disabilities that are more severe. Thank you very much.
Okay, I can take that. So you saw in our one of the framework we had is the counseling step, and this is where we believe that the counselor who is not just providing like psychological support only, like you mentioned the autism or people who are having maybe some psychological problems. So these counselors, they should be like professional counselors who can offer educational support, and they know the culture or the area they are working on. And one of the recommendations we provided is that they are hired from the area they will be serving it, so that they mind the cultural issues and the culture like matters. So that's why we think that the counselor who will be like making a very strong bond. And one of the things that we went through very fast in the presentation is that it should be multi sessions, not just one session that you meet with a counselor and you barely know him and you just he gives you like a list or something. No, we're looking for a multi-session counseling service where the individual is building a relationship with the counselor, and the counselor can take him into like small steps, maybe making some we call it in the report transitional goals. So they don't take them from zero to like, okay, go to the learning to go to a school or a training center in one step. No, they can achieve some transitional goals like creating motivation or getting them to because this is a psychological thing. Adult learning is all about it's your choice. You're not obligated to participate in adult learning. So psychology plays a big role here, and we say that in our report that you should the counselor should work as like a with the targeted population or the targeted individual in steps, achieving some transitional steps like, okay, getting him motivated, removing some of the as you said, like problems like autism or stuff like that, and then work with him gradually until they are encouraged and they are ready to participate in a learning activity.
Okay, I think Inez wants to add something to this.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, obviously this is a much higher level of, challenge, and I think there's no way we can envision a standalone program at Esdc to be able to cover all of this. And so my suggestion would be a kind of an ecosystem approach. We already have various players in the, in the government, in the government as well as in the private sector who are catering, catering for people with severe, for example, disabilities like autism, right? And so to me, the best way to go about this is how do you then line up all these different actors and each one of them, contributes towards it. So the exact mechanisms of how that would look like, to be honest, I'm not so sure, because it's it's complex, it's federal, it's provincial, but I don't see this as something that, Esdc alone can do it. And so it has to be one of those things where we lay out, a path. So, okay, from if they get out of the system, where do they go? Who puts money? How much money do they put? Who becomes that person who checks on their well-being? Who becomes that person who, you call when, I don't know, a person has a breakdown or something? Because this to me is much, much higher. So yes, we could have the counselor that support with the education counseling, but when it comes to, to higher needs, in medical needs, if I may say, then that's something a little bit higher, and Esdc would definitely need, organization that fits in that ecosystem. So that would be my answer.
Okay, next question is to Jennifer Welsh, and if both sides speak slowly enough, you can avoid my question. Jennifer.
I'm just very curious about the study circle that you mentioned. You were looking for examples of, ways to use tools, and I just wondered whether you see that as something that was culturally embedded. The Scandinavians have a lot of interesting cultures, including cultural practices, including, as I learned, in Denmark, putting babies in strollers outside with duvets to have their naps, right? Which is something that would be hard to inculcate elsewhere. Or do you actually think this kind of practice could be built where it didn't previously exist? I just wanted to hear more about it because it struck me as a very interesting idea. And if I read your brief right, 300,000 people is a significant population engaged in this practice. So I was just curious to learn more.
Yeah, actually,
oh, no,
no,
go
you
ahead.
want?
Sure.
Oh,
Well,
go ahead.
yeah, I'll go and then you can add on. Yeah, no, I was just going to say we certainly talked about this a lot in terms of with soft and hard policy transfer. There's always that that risk with different economic, social, cultural factors that can result in failed policy transfer. But I think a big thing is that the way these study circles were designed in Nordic countries is to address a lot of similar barriers that are experienced in Canada, including negative school experiences. So, you know, maybe failing during secondary school or bad experiences with teachers. So I think it would certainly be worth at least pilots to see if policy transfer is possible.
Okay, last quick word from Amber.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that yeah, it is embedded in the culture. I think the concept of study circles starts in the 18th or the 17th century in Nordic countries, and the thing is that the government came to realize that it's something that they want to subsidize or they want to promote, and that's why it's nowadays the study circles are actually funded by the government. And as Noah said, like it's an idea that we are saying that it's worth piloting through the Future Skills Center and to see if it can be transferred to Canada or not.
Good, thanks.
Okay, folks, I think we're going to have to wrap this up. This is the end of session 2. Well done, everybody. Thank you, everyone, for attending our session 6. We have 7 and 8 still to come this afternoon. Thank you to ESDC for sponsoring this policy lab. We hope that you have enjoyed the presentation and you value what has been done, and we hope that we can talk again in the near future. Jeff Kelly, the behind the scenes coach, thank you very much for taking on this team and giving them your time. And of course, the team itself, Udita, Noah, Inez, Amber, and Harris, thank you very much. Job very well done. We are going to break for exactly 1 hour, and we will be back with session number 7, which is ISED. So see you all in 1 hour.